As well, Financial Services Group PPS recently ran a survey of South African professionals and concerns they've raised about the quality of the LLB qualification here in South Africa. Now, with tertiary education under the spotlight, Finweek takes a look at what the problems with this qualification are and whether they are symptomatic of other professional degrees here in South Africa. We're joined by Finweek journalist Jessica Hubbard, John Marsden, National Sales Director at PPS, and Mtende Mhango, Deputy Head of the School of Law. Thank you so much for joining us. I think I'll start off with you, John. Just talk to us a little bit about the survey and why you felt it was important to delve into this specific qualification.
Well, Samantha, we as an organisation have over 200,000 graduate professionals as members of our organisation, and we embarked at the beginning of last year surveying them to find out what the sentiment was, generally speaking, amongst graduate professionals being influencers within the society. So we do general surveys, a quarterly survey, and we survey various types of professional groups, legal being one, doctors, dentists, etc. This was one of them. And we publish all of these results that we see. It's not our opinions. We are simply surveying what our members are saying and putting it out there for the industries to react to.
So how bad, when we talk about the LLB qualification, how bad is the quality of it rated in South Africa? How badly is it rated?
Well, our measure is a relative measure. It's how is it relative to how it was seen previously, and that we have seen a 10% reduction in confidence in the output. And I think that's fairly indicative of where we are as a country at the moment. We're obviously going through some levels of strife. And that tends to deflate any type of opinion amongst these professional groups. So what this is saying, I think, is looking at how people are finding jobs when they're coming out of universities. The possibilities of employment are obviously more challenged these days than they have been in the past. And I think we see that. And I think there may also be a little bit of that sentiment that, the degree that I did was always one that better than the one that comes after me. So, it's a relative measure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things that jumped out for me was the view that when you survey people saying, do you actually have faith in the industry in which you're going into, the measures seem to come back quite negative. I think so the amount was 45% said that they didn't really have a lot of faith of the industry going forward. I suppose part of that could be looking at just general environment at the moment. It is hard to find a job. There's not a positive vibe in the country. Do you think it's symptomatic of the law sector in general, or do you think it's broader industry?
I think it's much broader. When we look at the other surveys that we do quarterly, they all tend to trend the same, both upwards and downwards. Obviously, there are nuances within the various professions specific, but confidence in terms of the work environment. I think what we're finding as well at the moment, that students going through universities are less certain about where they want to be when they've graduated than perhaps they were in the past. So, and one finds that there's a relevance that comes out when you start to realize that the practical implication of what you're going to do in a work environment versus what you expected you might be doing during a course of study. I think that's the practical link that could be made here, that more education, more input about where you would go in a career post your qualification.
I think one of the things we threw it sort of out to our social media, the Finweek group for social media, and they were looking at, one of the things was, there's a lot of focus on which universities you're studying this qualification at, and it was quite interesting. Just a lot of people still, the UCT, the Cape Town University, still seem to be far higher regarded than Joburg and the inland. I mean, do you think it's probably a question to both of you? Do you think it's a fair comment to generalise that the Cape University is superior to Joburg from a professional perspective?
I think as PPS we can't make that judgment call. We survey our members on a generic basis, and we're not trying to make any view as to which one we feel is better. So I'm really not in a position to answer.
Professor, of course, this is an opportunity for you to step in and talk about the School of Law and how it fits into the broader picture.
Yes, thank you very much. Look, I think that we have heard some and I've read some of these comments. And there is responsibilities from the legal academia as well as the profession itself to improve the LLB degree. And I think there are things that the legal education can do, but there are other things that the profession itself can do. So we don't have much time today to talk about all of them. And I mean, I would invite the profession for us to sit down, in a workshop and to discuss them. But some of you might be aware that just after 1994, the LLB degree was shortened to 4 years. And so some of the challenges that which we as legal academia are aware of is that there isn't much time to actually do a lot in 4 years, to prepare somebody for the profession. And so that's where the partnership needs to come in, so that we can identify what are the minimum things that we can be able to achieve in those tasks.
So when you talk about that partnership, are you looking to work more with legal firms and understand what they're needing from you as a university?
Precisely. We've been calling for that, and I'm making that call today again, that we are calling to sit down so that we can define the problem, so that we can find solutions to the problems. Like I've said, there is responsibilities on both sides.
Sorry, just to jump in there, one of the big things that came out of that survey, I think, was that there's a problem with school leavers in their basic writing, literacy and mathematics skills, and that's impacting how they enter the universities. And so perhaps there needs to be more of a partnership between the professional services and the sort of basic educational organizations.
I agree with that assessment, and I think that's one of the things that we hope these discussions can help, is that even the school leavers who join university, we have a lot of quality issues around the students that actually join the university, where you are now, and we are having as a university increase the number of points to qualify to get into the LLB. Every year we increase that because we're trying to ensure that we get good quality students.
But then doesn't your pool get smaller?
Well, the pool doesn't get smaller, actually. In fact, the number of applicants each year is increasing, so the demand is there. But we're trying to keep, not, because we also have issues of resources as well. And so there are all these issues. Some of them are within our control, some of them are outside our control. So the partnership is with the basic education, with the profession itself. Because one thing I can mention is that one of the complaints from the profession is that when the graduates are coming in, they are failing to do X, Y, and Z. For example, drafting, for example. Now, the universities, the law schools cannot produce a graduate that is able to go and run for a firm. There are some things that you're going to have to learn in the school of experience.
And I suppose this is where the issue comes in. You shorten the degree and you're having to spend X amount of time on actually just catching them up to basics as principles and basic skills that need to be taught in school. And this comes back to the ultimate problem that we're looking at in South Africa.
Yeah, I mean, I'm cynical when it comes to law in the law sector, at least in general in South Africa. I mean, nothing irks me.
Running with the law there.
Yeah, I've had one or two, and they know exactly who they are. But I mean, you can look across Sandton at the moment. The biggest buildings are law societies in South Africa. They are the big law firms are essentially dominating. There is very little in the way of new entrants coming to the sector as a whole, and I think that means that you don't get the opportunity for broader experience within sort of upstart firms. There are plenty of entrepreneurial businesses who would love to have gophers and volunteer type people coming through in terms of young professionals. I mean, I'm not talking Girl Fridays, but there's such a concentration that it's very difficult to become a new entrant in the law fraternity in South Africa. At least that's my perception of it. And I think that it's become, there's also very much a glamour factor to it. I mean, I think it's the same sort of flow that the investment banking sector went through, and I think that you'll hope that in time we'll start to even out a little bit and try and introduce a little bit of competition.
Interesting concept you bring there, because it's a different spin on things. We've established the problem from the education point of view, but what is the problem from the sector point of view?
I think, Samantha, one of the biggest things we see as a survey and an organisation that deals extensively and exclusively in the graduate professional market is that the number of students coming out of graduating from universities and being unemployed for at least 2 years post-graduation is a serious problem, and one needs to try and find and identify mechanisms through which perhaps one can coach and mentor these people in that time when they're trying to find more formal employment. Certainly through graduate development programs and things like that. I think it's essential, because there's a gap at both ends of this continuum. The gap between school leavers going into university has been identified as a serious problem in almost all faculties. In fact, there was an article in the press earlier last week saying that perhaps we should consider more of a broader 4-year BCom degree. Taking your point exactly, that the amount of information that's being crammed into these degrees is extensive, and these students are not coming out with practical application, and that's what employers look for.
What about the US system? Because that's of course an interesting system where you have a generic degree for 3 or so years and then you specialize.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on how that could apply in South Africa and the cost of it to South Africans?
Yeah, look, the cost implications are huge in South Africa, and I think that's, to me, is a political question that has to be answered, because you remember that was a decision that was made before, but and it could actually, the cost implication could mean that a lot of people could be prevented from entering the field because of the cost implication. So that becomes now a political question that one has to decide whether or not that's the direction.
You're not going to have those specialists coming through, basically.
That's correct, but I can tell you that for many academics, that's actually the preference, that we actually encourage people to come and study the LLB as a postgraduate student, and we do get a number of students who are very mature when they come and they do very well, and so we encourage that. But I wanted to touch on one point. I mean, I teach pension funds, is the area pension fund law, and we always say in the industry that you know, the more you invest, the more you get out. And I would like to call on the profession, and they're doing a lot, but they need to invest more in legal education because they're going to get the benefits. And so that's, to me, I mean, talking about mentorship, for example, we have a program we've just started last year of mentoring, where we're calling on the legal profession to assist in mentoring these students as soon as they enter the university, so that by the time they leave, they have been exposed to some of the challenges that the industry is facing, and to address some of the concerns that they are raising. So I would like for them to work with us so that we can all invest, and we will actually be the ones that are going to get the benefits out of that investment.
How's the industry responded to that? Because I think that this is exactly the challenge we face, is that there's this great idea that we do want mentors, we do want opportunities, and yet every business sector has cut the number of people employed seems to be getting cut left, right and centre. That means that you never get the opportunity to actually bleed people in. You've simply got to take people who can hit the ground running. Right. And there are a lot of industries that simply don't put anything back. They might do the little side efforts, but they're not taking genuine steps to investing in the industry. I mean, what, is the law society or law sector putting something back?
Well, they are, but I think given the magnitude of the challenges that we face, I think more could be done, and I would like to see more to be done so that we can actually, tackle this head on.
Perhaps another, a less expensive building down the road in Sandton being quite controversial, and more money going into the future of investment.
I would say I might announce here that as a School of Law, one of the issues that we're trying to address as challenges is we're on a building campaign where we want to build a new building, because we have classes in some instances where our students are sitting on the floor. And so we want to put a new building. And these are some of the ways that we can, as a partnership, assist each other to address. I see a lot of buildings in Sandton. I mean,
there's lots of space there.
There's a lot of space in the university. But I think I agree with you. I can emphasize the point more that we need more investment in legal education for our communities to benefit.
When it comes to the teachers and the lecturers and the professors, what is the issue that you're facing from that end? Because we know that there's an issue across the board when it comes to the quality of teachers here in South Africa, whether it be schools or whether it be tertiary education. Is that an issue for you? And what would you put on the table as some of the solutions?
Well, look, we obviously we need resources there. We need to improve, and that's one way is through research and development, and that's one way that we can build our teaching capacity as well. And in that regard, I mean, one of the challenges that our teachers face is that when you get students who come from poor backgrounds and who come into the university, are struggling with the command of the English language itself, and yet, let alone, they have to deal with the concepts of law. And so it might take you 2 years to actually, overcome the language issue. And now the second year, you now are dealing with the concepts. So from a lecturer point of view, you can imagine the challenge that you have to deal with that, with that scenario. And at the end of the day, the product that we produce from there. So there's quite a lot that I think, this is why I'm saying, sitting down, I think for a couple of hours, we can actually put down what are the challenges and ideas from our side, and what is the role, I think, for the profession out there, that they can find a space to be able to assist.